Alrighty, hello and welcome back to the channel. For those of you who are returning, you kind of know what it's about, but for those of you who haven't been here before or might be new, let me just do a little disclaimer for you. I myself am a indie game developer. I do not work for CIG though. This is just kind of my take on a number of problems that Star Citizen has from my perspective and how I would fix them. Today we're going to be talking about the armor and weapons and some other things, and I kind of have to do this one today because I really want to get into this one right here, this little turd. But I have to do this one before I get into that one, and believe me, we will be coming back to that one. Unfortunately, today's video may be a little boring for some. I don't have a lot of visual aids like I usually do. It's going to be a ton of math and some lecturing and stuff, and I know this might not be everybody's cup of tea, so if you guys bow out with this one or it's, not really to your interest, I mean, that's okay. Totally understandable. Me personally, it's my bread and butter. It's kind of the stuff I do, along with some other things. As I will map something out as I'm designing a system and have it like fully mapped out before I actually go to build the thing, or work with an engineer to build it. So we know exactly what we're doing as not to waste time, which is in pretty stark contrast to what I've seen CIG do in the past, at least from the outside. But the returning members know this. If you're new here, I'm not really a YouTuber myself. I'm using MS Paint, Windows Movie Maker. I'm just trying to do what I can to get the video up on YouTube. I'm not a professional at making YouTube videos, so it's kind of new to me. But that's pretty much the end of the disclaimer. If you like this kind of content, awesome, glad to hear it. I'm kind of surprised at how much the last couple of videos took off, honestly. I didn't expect that. I had pitched something similar on the Spectrum forums back in the day, and people just started throwing chairs at me for suggesting that CIG didn't quite know what they were doing. But that's enough of that. We got a bunch of things to get into and cover before I can get on to the videos that I actually want to make, so let's go ahead and get started. First things first, we're going to have to do the vehicle armor, and we're also going to have to touch into classifications on what things are a little bit. Now, personally, if you ask me or anybody in the military, I just have to throw the thing out there about capital ships. I know CIG calls corvettes and frigates capital ships. In the military, by definition, those are not capital ships. Those are light surface combatants at best. In fact, destroyers aren't capital ships. Cruisers aren't even capital ships. If you want to be technical, a capital ship was something that if you maintained and it was still alive and combat effective, you could lose the rest of the Navy and all of the supporting vessels. But as long as you still had those vessels, the capital ships, you were still a force to be reckoned with. They were your most important vessels. Now that transitioned away during World War I, away from dreadnoughts and stuff like that, into World War II, into carriers. And then more modern times, carriers are still your capital ships, and the other capital ships that you would have would be the ballistic missile submarines, not fast attack or torpedo subs. Obviously ballistic missile subs have torps as well, but in terms of importance, or being a force to be reckoned with, your nuclear-armed ballistic missile submarines and your aircraft carriers are capital ships. Everything else are support vessels. Now, in terms of sci-fi, you can be pretty loose. Me personally, if I was to have to look at Star Citizen and the lore and stuff like that, I still wouldn't call corvettes capital ships. It would be pushing it to even call a frigate a capital ship. I would start with destroyers and go from there, honestly, because the end of the day, the size of some of these ships gets pretty ridiculous. So I would call a destroyer a small capital ship. Same thing with the Orion and Hawley here. If you're looking at this now, Star Citizen can do it however the heck they want. But again, if I was doing things, this is how I would do it. I would reclassify a lot of ships, so you actually know what you're getting into with each class. You've got a good general idea. Like if I say, a light fighter or medium fighter or like a fast attack craft or something like that, you have a good general idea of what we're talking about. So if you're reading some of this stuff in the background, in game design, there's several ways to make an armor system. and one of them is to do like a kind of like how you would see in like tank simulators, where you've got like a projectile based system and armor that has like ricochet chances, and it either pens or it doesn't pen, and all kinds of other stuff. And some people have talked about that being Star System's plans for armor, and I've looked around and I haven't really seen any definitive answers one way or the other. I just see them talking about, oh, we want these things to be totally immune to other things, or this, that, or the other, but they're real ambiguous about how they're actually going to do it. And if you were to do a projectile-based system in a game like Star Citizen, that would be a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. Or when I say projectile-based, I mean like a traditional like World of Tanks type armor thing, or War Thunder, where it's like ricochet chances and all kinds of other things. And the reason that's a terrible idea is because A, that is a monumental amount of work, and B, it's an ineffective solution for armor, because that only really works with kinetic energy projectiles, or bullets, like solid bullets. It's not good for dealing with a system that has explosives or other damage types, or damage over time, or any kind of caustic damage, which is still kind of damage over time, or any like chemical energy stuff, like heat rounds or anything like that. So it's bad for explosives. It's bad for everything other than kinetic energy projectiles. So explosives, DOTs, chemical energy, all of it, and lasers, energy weapons too. Like it's not good for that either. So there's still several ways to make the armor. Another way that they could do it, and it would work, but I don't recommend it because it would be a nightmare, would be to take the individual weapons and literally have a table saying that what they can do, how effective they are against each individual like entity in the game. That is, again, a terrible idea. It would work, and you could have very precise tuning, but oh my god, the amount of work that it would take to add anything new to the game, or even just tweak existing things, is just mind-bogglingly bad. I can't, without actually showing you something like that, and without you knowing what you're looking at, or being in background in game design, you would know how terrible it would to have a multi-hundred or thousand entity table type armor system. So a lot of you are probably asking, so how would you design an armor system that ticks most of the boxes, works relatively effectively, is pretty simple, and stuff like that? Well, the way I would do it is I would have, like I said, classifications of armor, which you can see in the background, that allows you to decouple a ship's actual like physical armor profile from the raw hit points that it has. And then I would put a tag under each entity or each ship, based off of what category it's in. Is it a light fighter, heavy fighter, fast attack craft, corvette? And you may notice that a lot of these armor classes kind of line up with some weapons that they have in game, and there's kind of a reason for that. CIG, as far as I could tell, was headed towards something like this years ago, and then just like up and stopped and flipped the table and went to go work on other things. And I really don't know why they did that, because they were on the right track. Like a lot of other things, it just needed tuning. It doesn't need a complete rework. It doesn't need to do any of this other crazy stuff like they're going to do with the flight model. 90% of your problems are tuning related, CIG. Now, I'm getting kind of off track, but like I said, what I would do is I would have a tag for the weapon and the thing that they're going to be attacking. Like let's just say that I'm attacking a medium fighter, all right? So a medium fighter would have class 3 armor, and let's say I have a class 3 weapon. So the weapon itself would have the tuning table in it based off of what it's attacking. The physical thing that it's getting shot has the thing that communicates back with the weapon that says, hey, this is what I am, this is what I'm hitting, and then the weapon knows how to behave accordingly. So if I had a medium fighter and I was being shot at by a size 3 weapon, I would say, again, this is my personal tuning type way of doing it. I mean, you could play with the numbers, you can do whatever you want down the road. This is just a general example. But if you had a size 3 weapon shooting at class 3 armor, I would say, okay, you do 70% of your damage to the target, because it's armored. You can get through it. You are doing damage, but it's basically punching across. And for standard weapons, I would have it so you can always punch down. So if a class 3 or size 3 weapon was shooting at like class 2 armor or below, it would just do full damage. And you can punch up a little bit. So if a standard class 3 weapon was shooting at like a heavy fighter or something like that, maybe it's like half of what it would be if it was shooting at a at the same size target. So instead of 70% of the damage, it would be like 35%. You know, that way you can still punch up a little bit, but it's less effective. And then if it's 2 sizes above, say like I'm shooting at a fast attack craft or something like class 5 armor with a class 3 weapon, I keep saying class 3, with a size 3 weapon, it would do no damage at all, none whatsoever. And this is really good for helping avoid what I like to call X-Wing syndrome, or, you know, Starfighter syndrome, where certain people get like their favorite starfighter and think that they should just run around and blow up the Death Star or battle station or sink capital ships by strafing them with guns. When is the last time any of you have ever heard of a fighter machine gunning a battleship to death and sinking it, or a guy running up to a tank and shooting it to death with a pistol from the outside, or punching it to death for that matter? Freaking never, right? So it's ridiculous that these things happen. And not only is it ridiculous that these things happen from like a realism perspective, it's also bad for game design, because what is the point of a larger capital ship or a big ship if I'm dying to a swarm of fighters? That's just insane. Like nobody's having fun there, except probably for the swarm of fighters who frankly don't care that the capital ship is suffering. They're probably laughing, going, see, I'm the biggest, bestest player ever, and if they wanted to fight back and have a fair fight, they would go get a fighter too, except I'm probably better than them, so everything is working as intended. You know, see what I mean? Like bad game design, that's not how stuff works. Now, this system does not make light fighters or anything useless, but it restricts them into like a more sane use case. Like, I can go after dropships, I can go after other fighters and harassment, I can intercept like really, really, really big anti-capital ship torpedoes, like size 10 and up, because they're going to be slow enough to where you could probably lock onto them and react in time. But smaller torpedoes, I seriously doubt you'll be able to intercept them. Certainly not easily. And, you know, also going around and spotting for people. I mean, there's still a ton of other uses for light fighters. It's just not killing large ships that should have so much armor that you could be immune. And that's exclusively with the guns, mind you. That is not saying that I shouldn't be able to, I don't know, carry like torpedoes or something, which is the point of a bomber, by the way, to carry torpedoes and then launch a heavy ordnance attack against bigger ships. Then yes, then all bets are off. You're using the proper tool for the right target. You know, everything's working as intended. The problem is strafing stuff to death with really tiny guns and having it work. And the fact, again, that we are 11 years in and that hasn't been fixed is crazy. This system would allow you to, like I said, decouple that HP pool from the weapon damage and make it to where certain weapons just flat out cannot damage certain types of armor profiles. And there's also like outliers too that you can have. I mean, there's more tuning you can do. Like, for example, say I have a medium fighter, right? But say it's a really armored fighter in lore, and it's still the size of a medium fighter. So maybe I have the hit points of a medium fighter, maybe a teeny bit more, but it's got the same hit points of a medium fighter. But say it's, like I said, it's super, super, super armored. Say instead of having class 3 armor, even though, again, it is a medium fighter, it's a special case and has class 4 armor with medium fighter hit points. You know, you can do stuff like that. And it's not just for defensive either. You can do the same thing for weapons. Remember how I said like a standard weapon can always punch across, it can punch up slightly, and it can always punch down? Well, maybe we have something like a railgun, for example, that it's doing class 3 damage, but it's got special rules where, because it's a high pen, you know, railgun, it has a +1 armor pen profile. So even though it's a class 3 weapon, it's doing class 3 damage, maybe it's able to do full damage to class 3 and down. It's able to do 70% of its damage to a class 4 target and 35% of its damage to a class 5. Even though, again, it's a class 3 weapon, it's a special high pen weapon. And the inverse is also true. Say I have like a class 3 flak gun or something. It's an AoE type weapon. And, you know, except, you know, it's flak. It's got terrible armor pen. So even though it's doing class 3 damage, it may only be able to do like 35% of its damage to other class 3 targets. If it has armor, it would do 70% of its damage to class 2, and then class 1 and down it would do full damage because it's an AoE flak burst. It's not a a direct hit like some of this other stuff is. That is kind of how I would do armor. And then you may have noticed that things like the outliers here that I have listed, like the arrow is a light fighter, but it's supposed to be an armored anvil platform according to lore. This is not me, this is lore. According to lore, it's basically got light fighter hit points, but it's really bulky and heavy, and that's because it has like a medium fighter armor profile. The same thing with the Gladiator and the Hornet series. They're medium fighters and light bombers, and they have the same hit points as those things. Again, maybe a teeny bit more, but not nearly as much as something like a heavy fighter. But they have the armor profile of those things, meaning you have to use bigger guns to get through their armor in order to damage them. This is a really good way to tune things. You've got a lot of wiggle room. You can make all kinds of interesting weapons, and you can do this. It is a relatively simple to implement system. So I don't understand why it's been 11 years now and we don't have a basic armor system like this in game. Like, this is just driving me nuts. Like, it boggles my mind. And the funny thing is, this isn't even the only way to do an armor system either. There are other ways too. This is just one of the better solutions I see for this particular application. I'm looking at the time here, and I'm probably going to break this video into 2 parts. I got to wrap this one up, so my next one is going to be how I would do the weapons and why. It'll be like a part 2 to this. I'm not going to do another like intro. I'm just going to jump into the next one. So I will get that out later today or tomorrow. Take care, and thanks for watching. Oh, and by the way, one other thing, I don't know if anyone has noticed in the description of the videos and stuff, I am shilling my referral code super hard, so if you haven't gotten in the Star Citizen or you feel like making a new account, I would love it if you used my code, because I'm just 5 referrals away from getting a light fighter unlocked on the referral program. So, really excited about that. But, it's to each their own. You don't have to do that.